Good morning, I'm Mike Naso with the latest on Hurricane Isaias on this Saturday morning, August 1st, 2020. We are now in August, getting into the heart of what is already a very active hurricane season, expected to be even more active as time goes on. And as you can tell, we have a hurricane this morning, Hurricane Isaias, up to 85 miles per hour overnight, even though it doesn't look so hot on satellite. The airplanes flying around found those winds a solid Category 1 hurricane. It's at 23.9 north, 77.1 west, moving northwest at 12. That is much slower than when it was a tropical wave moving through the Caribbean, and that does prolong the wind and rainfall risk for areas there of the Bahamas. It is very near Andros Island, and it will, on this forecast track, get very close to the Florida coastline on Sunday mainly, but even later tonight. And even if it doesn't make a direct landfall, which right now we don't think it will, it's going to get close enough to possibly bring hurricane conditions to the coast. So it's going to be a rough weekend there on the east coast of Florida. Because of that, we do have hurricane warnings from Boca Raton, Florida, to the Volusia Flagler County line, as well as the Northwest Bahamas, the Central Bahamas, and a hurricane watch from Hallandale Beach to south of Boca Raton. And we also have tropical storm warnings north of Ocean Reef to south of Boca Raton, Florida, including Lake Okeechobee, because remember, these tropical storm force winds extend out further than the hurricane winds, so if the center's just offshore, we could have tropical storm winds well inland, and that could take down power lines, trees, shingles, cause a lot of problems. Here's the latest satellite imagery, and you can see overnight it still has this persistent area of convection blowing up here over the Turks and Caicos Islands. The actual center of the hurricane is right about in here. In fact, let me clear the screen so you can see that better. It's right about in here, this area. So it's blowing up, but it doesn't look that great. It is being sheared, and you can see that even better. See up here how these clouds are trying to fan out here, but then there's that flatness to it right there. That is a sign that it is getting sheared. It's almost like hitting a brick wall, which is great news. If this was in a good environment, sliding west-northwest, we'd be dealing with a dangerous hurricane approaching southeast Florida. Instead, it's been kind of dancing towards Andros Island, but it should make a landfall, move very near or over it, and then make that turn very, very close to the coast of Florida, and any deviation to the left, we will see a landfall. So it is a situation you got to be ready for if you're under those hurricane warnings. As far as the track, you can see the forecast models. Some of it still potentially bring it inland, but a lot of them keep it just offshore. But that doesn't mean it won't make landfall anywhere. You can see they bring it inland in South Carolina, North Carolina, and push it up the East Coast. That will be a problem. The good news is with the wind shear, it shouldn't be strengthening. Even if it hits Florida and then moves back offshore, we likely will only be dealing with a tropical storm up here, probably not a hurricane. At least that looks that way right now. But because it is a hurricane, you guys got to be ready for it to maintain hurricane strength all the way up the East Coast if it were to do that, and that would cause a lot of problems, no doubt. Check out this beautiful radar in the Bahamas. This thing is really cool. Look at that. We have a good bird's eye view of the hurricane, and you can obviously see it's been, the whole bottom half here is just gone. And that's a sign of dry air intrusion, and that's also a sign of westerly and southwesterly wind shear. So last night, about 5, 6 o'clock, we were seeing a closed eye, and that was very, very concerning that it was going to crank up and strengthen. Right now, we kind of have a moon shape here, kind of a half eye wall. And even though that's still a hurricane of 85 miles an hour, it is not a significantly strengthening hurricane. Nevertheless, the center's right here, and Andros Island is right about in here, so it's almost making landfall, and later this morning it'll move right over or near that island, and so it's going to be a rough day. Also, Nassau in the Bahamas is getting very close to you guys right there. I circled in gray, and you're going to have potentially hurricane force winds, and that's why all those hurricane warnings are out as Isaias pulls towards the northwest at 12 miles per hour. Here's the wind map. You can see hurricane winds affected the Inaguas, but it really hasn't affected land. It's been south of most of the central Bahamas, but it looks like Andros, you're definitely going to get in hurricane winds, and then probably Nassau and Grand Bahama. Obviously, Grand Bahama and Abaco were destroyed last year by a Category 5 Dorian. They don't need another hurricane, but unfortunately it looks like this one is going to go near or right over them. In fact, if it moves closer to Florida, that could be worse because that'll put them on the right side with the highest surge and wind. So hopefully it's not too intense, but still a hurricane less than a year after that battering they took from Dorian is not what we want to see at all. This is the very long-range Miami radar, and look at right there, see that curly Q I just circled? That's the eye of Hurricane Isaias, and this is Andros Island here. Andros Island was the island that great Labor Day hurricane of 35 moved over. It was a Category 1 at Andros, and then between Andros Island and the Keys, it exploded to a catastrophic Category 5 and was the strongest hurricane ever to hit America. Labor Day 1935. Here's another view of the long-range Miami radar. The center of the hurricane, the eye, is right over here, and you can see these bands coming in, and there's going to be some squally weather and some heavy rain. So don't think that just if it doesn't make landfall in southeast Florida, you guys are going to get away scot-free. You could definitely have some impact from this hurricane. Rain and surge are big threats with this. You can see rainfall in the Bahamas, 6 to 10 inches here in areas of the central and northern Bahamas, and then even higher, 10 to 15 inches as the system slows down. Remember, it's going to slow. That's why even though it's going to be approaching Florida tonight, Saturday night, it's going to be Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. This thing's still going to be paralleling the coast, and that could drop a lot of heavy rain, to say nothing of the 2, 4, 6 inches we could see up the East Coast once the track takes that northeast bend over the areas of North Carolina, Virginia, and the Mid-Atlantic come Monday and Tuesday. They're going to have to deal with it. As far as the water rise and onshore flow, the storm surge on the right side, the north side of the hurricane, if it gets close enough, you could have that flow there between Jupiter Inlet and areas further north up to 2 to 4 feet. That's a nasty water rise, 1 to 3 from Jupiter down to Miami. So again, storm surge is a threat along the Florida coast, no doubt about that. Here's another look at the infrared, and again, it doesn't look that good. I mean, it's got this weirdness going on here, dry air being entrained. You can see the flow here is not exactly that great. It's kind of flat there. It doesn't look like a textbook hurricane because it's really getting battered by wind shear and dry air. But the fact that it's 85 miles an hour and bursting, headed for Andros and then paralleling Florida, means you got to be ready, even though it's just a Category 1 hurricane. Still a hurricane. Still a hurricane. This is the wind shear chart, and you can just see there's a upper level anticyclone here in the Caribbean, and that clockwise flow, which if it was over the top of the hurricane would be favorable, is to the south of the hurricane, and it's just undercutting it there, and it's been getting the guillotine for the last, say, 6, 10, 12 hours, and that's been keeping it in check from intensifying more. Thank goodness, because you don't want it to get too strong. Key messages as of this morning. Number 1, hurricane conditions and surge expected in the Bahamas through today. Hurricane warnings in effect. Number 2, hurricane conditions expected on the Florida East Coast late today and tonight, and a hurricane warnings in effect. Number 3, storm surge possible all the way from Jupiter Inlet north, where water rises of 2 to 4 feet above ground level are possible along the immediate coastline as well as adjacent waterways, and residents in those areas should follow advice given by local emergency officials. Number 4, heavy rains, potentially life-threatening floods, especially in low-lying and poorly drained areas across south to central Florida and across the Carolinas to the mid-Atlantic. Remember, next week, Carolinas and into Virginia could be impacted. And finally, number 5, there is a risk of impacts from winds, heavy rain, and storm surge along much of the East Coast. And again, it's too soon exactly to tell what's going to be the hardest hit areas and when, but right now it appears straight up the eastern seaboard a very wet weekend and into next week, with the landfall of Isaias somewhere in the Carolinas, probably as a tropical storm, but not before hitting the Bahamas and scraping Florida as a hurricane. But I'm Mike Naso. That's your early morning update. It's been a long night tracking this thing, so I'm a little bit frazzled there in my words, but again, a Category 1 hurricane nearing Andros Island, expected to parallel Florida. Hurricane warnings are out. Be prepared. I'll be back with more on Isaias.